I would like to thank the Caribbean countries at ALBA, St. Lucia, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Nicaragua, Bolivia, Cuba, which add their opposition to United States invasion into Venezuela. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov spoke on the phone with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, offering Russia's support, while Chinese Foreign Ministry sent a video expressing very clearly to the United States that no intervention in Venezuela will be tolerated by China upon any pretext. We also have Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum expressing support for non-intervention, and of course Gustavo Petro from Colombia, who warns that destabilization in Venezuela would lead to destabilization in Colombia as well. And of course, many residents in many Central and South American countries support Venezuelans in our rejection of United States invasion. The count of official supports, as far as I have been able to assess, is 33 countries explicitly supporting Venezuela, while only 3 countries support the United States, which are Ecuador, Paraguay, and Guyana today. It is interesting that Irfan Ali's government support for United States war against Venezuela occurs during a presidential election, and it was retweeted immediately by Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. It looks like the coordination between Marco Rubio, Irfan Ali, and Mrs. Maria Corina Machado, who has been on primetime TV on Fox News in the United States several nights in a row, are trying to build a narrative in the United States so that invasion is supported. The problem is that the United States lost in Vietnam, lost in Afghanistan, is losing in Ukraine. And did the United States really win in Iraq? Because they could topple a regime, but what happened later was many years of uncertainties. And Venezuela will probably be the same. And the last few days have been reassessing the probabilities of war. Right now, it still seems that it won't happen, or at least it won't happen yet. The ships still have to come. It seems that the ships that were not deployed during the last time we found about it was because of climate issues occurring because of Hurricane Erin. But once Hurricane Erin is out of the way, the United States ships are expected to be deployed back into the vicinity of Venezuela's territorial waters. Venezuelan Army, Navy, and Aviation is getting prepared. We boast one of the best militaries in Latin America and the Caribbean, with brand new equipment from Russia. And as we could clearly see in the war in Ukraine, it seems that nowadays Russian military is superior than United States military. Of course, by sheer numbers, United States has more units than Venezuela does, but Venezuela has the advantage of defense and of proximity. So we could deploy all of our armies at once, while the United States hasn't been able yet to bring in the first ship, even though it's clear that they are in the process. On the political side, it is unclear how deeply involved is President Donald Trump on this issue. This seems an issue clearly confined to Secretary of State Rubio and Pam Bondi, and perhaps Donald Trump Jr., who is not a member of the administration. But President Donald Trump is always conceding to petroleum interests by Chevron, and perhaps Donald Trump is the one who plays the carrot and Marco Rubio the one who plays the stick. Journalists avoided asking about Venezuela on Donald Trump's press conference today, which is significant because a lot of people thought that would be a major point. I would also express my deepest gratitude to Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who urges the United States and Venezuela to de-escalate and solve their discrepancies through political means. Peace is preferable than any war. However, it is clear that war might occur. In that respect, not only 4.5 million Venezuelan militias are being called to duty, but additional reserves might be recruited tomorrow and on Sunday on special efforts in public plazas all across the country, and national unity is expected. Opposition party Unión y Cambio, led by former presidential candidate Enrique Capriles, explicitly approves defending our homeland as more preferable than allowing intervention or invasion from foreign powers. It is unclear if this war would actually tilt the balance for the Essequibo dispute. Venezuelan side has always been using dialogue in the terms of the Geneva Agreement of 1966, while Guyana prefers to use the International Court of Justice, which might still take a few years. However, if Venezuela and the United States enter war, chances of Venezuelan forces annexing all of the Essequibo and perhaps beyond into Georgetown could increase, and that is not a desirable scenario, especially when we have been trying during all these months to converge development, roads, pipelines, refineries, and oil and gold industries of Venezuela and Guyana. It has been interesting to notice that Guyana election campaign has tried to involve current government of President Irfan Ali on gold smuggling from Venezuela but exported through Georgetown port. So the initial accusation that was given to candidate Asruddin Mohammed now is also being applied to President candidate Irfan Ali. This does not look good. I am highly concerned about the rejection of Carter Center initial objections on electoral conditions in Guyana, which were quickly dismissed by the Irfan Ali regime. That doesn't make any sense, and it reminds us what happened in Venezuela when the Carter Center expressed that the elections were not clean. I just see the electoral situation in Guyana very uncertain. I do not know if the population will accept the results if the candidate they oppose is awarded the presidency, if the ballots are too close. This is a highly important election, especially for Venezuela. A Nasruddin Mohammed victory would be glorious because he would probably help out to de-escalate the United States-Venezuela current tensions. It was completely unneeded that Guyana gets into team losers, because if the only support the United States has been able so far to secure is only Guyana, Ecuador, and Paraguay, while Venezuela is supported by the entirety of the rest of the countries of the Western Hemisphere, including the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, the United States will not have it easy. Venezuela will respond, and there will be lots of American casualties. There is also the issue of Congress. A United States war against Venezuela is not being approved by the United Nations and has not even been addressed or authorized by the United States Congress. It just looks as a lone political move by Rubio, Irfanali, and Machado. That's it. And they need this war in order to achieve their presidential aspirations in their countries. Because drugs, of course, are an excuse. As Vice President of Venezuela said, the biggest cartel is the cartel of the North. Because if there are so many drug addicts in the United States, it's because there has been under the table security so that drugs are readily available in that country. Why doesn't the United States deploy all of these resources that they are now wasting on inconvenient wars against their neighbors and what should be our friends into their schools, colleges, and universities, where students, instead of learning mathematics and English, are getting hooked into drugs? Most valedictorian and salutatorian students at United States colleges and universities are from India and China, because United States students usually are not fond of overworking or overstudying, as the party culture in the United States is extremely important, and it's probably one of the reasons why that empire is in decay. Here in Venezuela, the opposition, of course, will become divided. A huge chunk will eventually unite forces with the Venezuelan government to save our country, and we will probably have to consider the rest of the opposition that is still asking for an invasion against Venezuela as our enemies, which means that there is a probability that we might engage into civil war or guerrilla warfare. I do not know how long I will be able to tolerate family members supporting the United States if my family members are Venezuelans. I think Mrs. Maria Corina Machado has gone too far and she should be arrested. Even if that upsets the United States and it starts the war a few days sooner. Because if the United States is determined to initiate war, we might as well get rid of Maria Corina Machado, who has been Venezuela's #1 enemy for the last 15 years. She has never allowed the rest of the opposition to agree or dialogue, and she has always, due to her hardcore stance, been able to promote hatred and fascism on Venezuelan population. She has gone too far, appearing on a person who claims to be a Venezuelan presidential candidate, talking on prime time on United States television shows in support for having her country destroyed, is a red line that has already been crossed, which is delinquent and deserves jail. It is highly uncertain how all of this will occur. In the geopolitical chessboard, it would be convenient for Venezuela that Russia continues winning positions on the Ukraine war. It is important that Ukraine never gets to recover and that Russia finishes by recovering their territories and oblasts that were taken away from them when the Soviet Union was dismantled, as their citizens so many times have voted not to be part of Ukraine because they prefer to be part of Russia. And it would be useful that the United States waste its resources there forever so that they get pressed not to enter Venezuela. Because the problem is that they have a military industrial complex in the United States that needs to produce weapons constantly. And as there are less business opportunities in the Ukraine war, now they want to engage the Caribbean Venezuelan war. It will be interesting to see further reactions from Caribbean countries beyond the diplomatic support for Venezuela that was recently provided through ALBA emergency meeting, as the United States vessels, ships, and aircraft start flying and sailing over Caribbean waters and airspace. This war will be messy if it starts. I really don't want it to start. And I really would not like that Venezuela recovers Essequibo through war, which is what would happen if the United States invades Venezuela and Venezuela extends the war into Guyana, parts of Colombia, and Trinidad and Tobago. Well, lots of irregular groups from Colombia would join in and help Venezuela. Instant Latin American support for Venezuela is expected because Ecuador and Paraguay are among the smallest countries in the continent. Central American countries so far have not supported the United States. We have the example of President Mulino in Panama. He did not like when Donald Trump threatened to take by war the Panama Canal. So President Mulino will have to decide if he will let Venezuela just fall trap of the United States under the excuse that President Mulino is not a political ally of President Nicolás Maduro. A former ally of Nicolás Maduro called Elias Hawa, he was supposed to be the successor of Hugo Chavez back in 2012. He was the vice president, and while Hugo Chavez was ill, he removed Vice President Elias Hawa and incorporated Nicolás Maduro as vice president. Hugo Chavez went to Cuba to die, and Nicolás Maduro became president because he was the vice president. In case Nicolás Maduro is killed, the line of succession would be Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, who freely travels across Europe. She doesn't have the mobility or sanctions problems of Nicolás Maduro, and she is the brain under all economic petroleum industry in Venezuela. However, the Venezuelan military is absolutely glued together with a whole lot of support of Maduro's allies and a sizable number of Venezuelan opposition who is patriotic. Bombardments to Venezuelan facilities could occur, as it has happened in Yemen, as it has happened in Gaza. Anyone who lives in a country on the verge of war knows that we could die at any time, but we still have to defend our country or our continent. Guyana voters should think about if it will be a good choice for them to vote for the re-election of a president who is actively seeking war. It has always been said on Guyanese propaganda that Nicolás Maduro wanted war with Guyana, and that has never happened. However, Irfan Ali today signed an endorsement for United States war against Venezuela. I would really like that our countries get along and discuss the Essequibo in the terms of necessities of all regions in the territory and manage a solution. And maybe we could even involve Spain and United Kingdom, because this conflict is so old, and it was initiated between Spain and Great Britain and the Netherlands, and all of those countries are united right now defending Ukraine. The more I think about this, the more I believe that we are united South America, where borders of countries become more irrelevant and economic trade and brotherhood between our populations is a desirable outcome. However, that looks like a dream because there are politicians looking for election or re-election who are inventing wars that shouldn't even exist in order to garner likes on social media.